All right, everybody, here we go with the notes for Chapter 22, looking at television. Television is not a single visual entity. It's a video experience that is delivered in several different ways. Over-the-air broadcast, cable, satellite, internet protocol, IPTV for short, also over-the-top television, which is what we think of as like the various streaming platforms on your smart TVs. This is funded in two different ways, either by means of advertising or by subscription, and sometimes there's a mixture of both. In the 1950s and 60s, it wasn't uncommon for network primetime shows to earn a 20 rating, which would be 20% of an audience within a particular market. 20% of the population, I should say. Before the internet, primetime network programs were in high demand by advertisers. It was the newest, the greatest thing, and as televisions became more and more popular, got into more and more homes, it was the default form of entertainment for many families. Some things happened in 1962 around the American Broadcasting Company, ABC, and a lot of it attributed to Oliver Trays. Trays decided to premiere all of ABC's programs the week after Labor Day in order to appeal to the big three Detroit auto manufacturers that made huge investments in television network advertising and that debuted their new car models the week after Labor Day every year. So this was pushing up the beginning of the fall season, and doing so in order to attract the automotive manufacturers to be able to advertise with ABC, get a jump on the new models that the car manufacturers are putting out, so the advertisers saw it as when ABC saw it as a chance to get their programming out first and also attract those big advertising dollars. Trays then asked the television rating company Nielsen to break down its household ratings into demographic segments that included an 18 to 49 segment. This encompassed younger people that advertisers craved, and it was a demographic that ABC's more youth-oriented programming appealed to. So it helped ABC to be able to determine the age brackets of who was watching, and they could prove those numbers to prospective advertisers to woo them into advertising with their network. Trays also realized that advertisers were more willing to place bets in the spring on a new program in the coming fall if those advertisers had a guarantee of a certain level of viewership for that program. ABC's new pricing structure, as a result, was based on how much an advertiser would pay to reach 1,000 viewers. This is where we get the concept of the CPM, the cost per thousand. ABC came up with the idea. Now, a couple of terms for you here. The scatter market is when advertisers buy avails during the same quarter that the ads are to be running. So if you're looking in the fall season and looking at late September, October, November into December, scatter market would be when advertisers go to the networks and say, I want to buy advertising time this coming month or this coming week or whatever the case may be. Now, the upfront market is the concept of buying primetime ads in the spring for the upcoming fall season. So they're buying upfront, they're buying in advance. And this has become really a big to-do for the networks, where they showcase to prospective advertisers and media agencies the different shows that they're planning on releasing in the fall and talking about what their estimated audiences are going to be, the numbers that they expect to bring in, the various demographics they expect to bring in, all that sort of thing. Now, in return for the early commitments of the advertisers to buy, the networks are going to guarantee audience rating levels and CPMs and give advertisers a discount off of the prices that they would have to pay if they purchased that same advertising during the same quarter that the advertising was supposed to run. it was more valuable for the networks to get advertisers to buy in early and solidify a large portion of the advertising avail so that the networks would be able to estimate their operating budget a little more, have a little bit of a cushion to be able to do the things that they need to do as a network. Now, typically the broadcast networks are going to sell somewhere around 80% of their fall primetime commercial inventory in that upfront market. And the cable networks are going to sell about half of their time. Again, this is a great way for the advertisers to be able to get a bit of a discount, get a bit of a guarantee on the advertising in terms of reaching target audience and all that sort of thing. And it gives networks money to be able to fuel their operations for the coming year. Why do advertisers continue to pay more for what is seemingly becoming much smaller audiences as we go from year to year to year? Television is losing audience to all sorts of different other forms of media, especially streaming platforms and various internet platforms. Well, there's a few reasons. Advertisers believe that they can get relevant audience reach through television. And that's because television is still by and large the main place that we're going to find programming that appeals to a wide berth of people or to general audiences. They're going to buy from trusted media partners. The networks have longevity. They have lasting power. They've been around since the 40s and the 50s, and they know how television works. They buy in a brand safe environment because of the regulations, especially on broadcast television, but to a certain extent cable as well. The types of content that's available, that's the networks are going to provide programming that appeals to as many people as possible. They're also going to, especially in the broadcast world, fall within FCC guidelines in terms of content and that sort of thing. So they don't have to worry as much about at least certain types of offensive content. And then there is the aspect of live programming, sports in particular. Viewers rarely record live sports programming because they want to see the action in real time. They want to know what the score is. They're not going to record that programming. They're going to watch it, sit there as it's happening. And because they don't want to miss any of the action, they will actually sit and watch the commercials because they want to be right there when the game comes back on the screen. So it's a very effective tool for delivering advertising. Audiences are more fragmented than ever before, and there are fewer and fewer media vehicles that can reach huge audiences simultaneously. It's still a good vehicle for that because of the live programming elements, because of the general audience value that is there. Even if some people are watching broadcast television shows through the streaming platforms, many of those streaming platforms are now owned by the networks themselves, or the networks have a stake in the particular streaming platform that they are utilizing. So there's still value there. Also, advertisers like the impact of 30-second commercials on network television. Commercials that are created to appeal to the broadest swath of consumers as possible. So, products and services that do appeal to people en masse are still going to have effective reach by using television. Now, how are these ads sold? Upfront deals typically involve a guaranteed cost per thousand based on the audience delivery of a program. The network would provide make-good ads to the advertiser if necessary in order to make up for any actual audience shortfalls. So if a network promised that a certain show was going to get a 5 share, for example, and it turns out when the ratings reports come out that the show only got a 4 share. Well, the network, instead of refunding the advertiser or paying back a portion of the fees, they're going to provide extra advertising to that particular customer in the demographics that they're trying to reach on other shows or at other times in order to get them that cost per thousand that they promised. The networks typically guarantee audience levels that are slightly higher than they expect because the networks would rather underperform and give advertisers make goods than overperform their audience estimates and then realize that they didn't charge enough for that advertising. So it's somewhat nefarious here, but depending on how you look at it, the fact that they do provide those make goods for the various advertisers when those CPM values don't measure up, for the most part, advertisers see that as a good value because they're getting extra advertising more than what they paid for. And it's kind of that sense that they're going to put the ads on until they hit that CPM value that they were anticipating. Some networks offer a limited number of advertisers guaranteed deals based on business outcomes. So maybe if a advertiser is looking for a certain number of people to walk into their stores, a certain number of people to make phone calls, a certain number of people to head onto their websites or their apps or things like that, there's ways now that television can measure those sorts of things. And even, especially if you're talking about the online aspect of things, driving people to a website. If there's a goal to get X number of people that come from a certain source, that can be very easily measured through the website itself. And really, this is television's way of answering the various detailed ways that Google and Facebook and those in the new media can give more precise measurements of the audiences that are out there. Television's attempt to answer to that. Addressable advertising is delivered to smart television sets that are connected to the internet and through a set-top box provided by a cable system operator. Now, some TVs and some stations are even able to do this now through antenna television, just over-the-air broadcast. That's still kind of in development in many ways, but it is becoming a thing. But assuming that we're dealing with this being delivered through cable or through satellite, those connected TV homes can be served ads or other devices. It can be served on other devices, I should say, like smartphones while they're watching TV. And this is done through a smart chip in the television set. It's able to see all the devices that are on a network and be able to push that stuff to those devices. Some of the networks hesitate to embrace addressable advertising because they would be selling off slices of their total audience to advertisers that only want to reach specific segments of that audience. Television has been a medium that has, for a large part of its history, dealt in generalities. And to try to become more and more specific is a bit of a learning curve for them, a little painful for them in some ways, but it is part of the evolution of how traditional broadcasting is trying to continue to be relevant. Now, we have been talking in large part about broadcast TV to this point. Let's now take a look at cable. Cable as a whole gets more viewers than broadcast television as a whole. But because of the splintering of audiences, individual broadcast channels are still overall performing better than individual cable channels. Cable penetration is not as vast as is broadcast television penetration. So for those that don't subscribe to cable and are watching television on their televisions using their antenna, they have less channels to be able to surf around and look. So there's that, plus the fact that broadcast TV is available to cable subscribers as well. And the content on most broadcast stations is going to try to appeal to mass general audiences. So Individual broadcast networks still fare much better than individual cable networks, but all the cable channels together do better than all the broadcast channels together. As far as selling cable channels are largely being sold in bundled packages along with their broadcast counterparts. This is one of the effects of consolidation and vertical integration. For example, Viacom, in addition to owning the CBS television network, owns a lot of cable channels, including MTV, VH1, Comedy Central, BET, and others. Paramount Network also involved in that. And there's also various properties that are associated with NBC and Comcast, and also various channels that are associated with Disney and ABC. So many of these cable networks are being offered in conjunction with their broadcast counterparts as a package deal. As far as syndication is sold to individual local television stations to air exclusively in their markets. So when you see a TV show that is not part of a network lineup, this is what we're talking about when it comes to syndication. We talk more in detail about syndication in the broadcast programming class. But very briefly, there's basically two types of syndicated television. The first is what's called first run programming. This is brand new programming that has never previously aired on television networks. Most of your game shows, most of your talk shows that don't run in network time slots are going to be first run. And there are some dramas and comedies that are provided in this way as well. Most dramas and comedies, though, are going to be off-network types of programming. These are shows that previously aired on a broadcast network. So, for example, when you see reruns of Seinfeld or Friends or some of the other shows that originally were on broadcast network prime time, these are considered to be off-network shows. Syndicated programs are licensed to stations on usually a barter basis of some type. Sometimes it might be cash plus barter. And basically what we mean by barter is that within the half hour or hour that a TV show runs, there's going to be a certain number of minutes that are available for commercial advertising. Generally, it's 8 minutes worth of commercial avails for a 30-minute show. So you get 22 minutes of actual program and then 8 minutes of commercials. Many times, a typical barter agreement will be that the syndicator gets to keep 2 minutes within that half hour in order for them to sell advertising, and then the local TV station that's running the show will get the rest of the avails to sell. And that's a general. Those numbers can vary from show to show, from station to station, and from market to market. But basically, it's that idea that the inventory is what the commodity is for being able to realize revenue, both for the syndicator and for the particular television station. Now, there are some shows that are out there that are pure cash. Not a lot of them out there, but they do exist. But most times it's going to be either pure barter or cash plus barter. When television is bought on a market-by-market basis, not on a network basis, this buying strategy is called spot television. And what happens here is that this is really valuable for national companies that perhaps want to do a special emphasis on an advertising campaign in a certain market or a certain region of the country that it might not necessarily make sense to air that advertising nationwide. So it's not as valuable for them to just go to the network and say, put this commercial on everywhere. They may want to go to individual stations or groups of stations. Spot television buys are placed by agencies by contacting representative companies called reps. And these national reps are sales organizations that represent local television stations outside of their local markets. So you would call one person that would coordinate the buying and placement of advertising in stations in various markets, in Raleigh, as well as in Greensboro, as well as in Charlotte, as well as in Atlanta, as well as in Washington, D.C. You get the idea. National spot revenue represents anywhere from 30 to 50% of a local television station's revenue. So this is really big business for the local broadcast stations. Now, a media agency buyer is going to call or email or use some sort of an online service in order to send an RFP, a request for proposal, to a national rep salesperson. That begins the process of buying spot television. The buyer is then going to call the national rep and give him or her the details of an upcoming campaign, which markets they want to buy, and any other details that are important to the actual agreement that they want to make. That rep salesperson is then going to attempt to be the first salesperson to meet with the buyer in order to maximize both primacy and recency. And we've talked about those ideas in previous chapters. To be the first person to be able to reach out to a prospective advertiser so that you can be kind of the thought leader and be able to share your insights, and then also to be the last person to present so that they remember you as being the most recent person to be able to talk with them. The rep salesperson gathers preliminary information from the stations that they represent, and basically this is going to be looking at what the available inventory is at each of those individual stations, what the current ratings status is for those stations, whatever their current rate card is, and wiggle room and negotiating price and all that sort of thing. The rep is then going to call a local television station's national sales manager, or NSM. Their job is to interact with the station's national rep firm and to strategize on how to best secure national spot business. So there's someone that's working at the individual station, or perhaps covering several stations for a television station owner, and deals with the rep programmer in that particular way. The NSM is typically going to update the rep salesperson on current programming, upcoming special events, also different added value opportunities that the station may have available, various sponsorships or promotions, maybe digital platforms that can enhance what an advertiser may want to do. Any of those sort of things, they will be in conference with each other on what is available and what can happen. The rep is then going to generate a specific proposal for the agency buyer. The rep then creates a presentation that includes the proposal and its benefits and advantages to present to the buyer, and then at that point is usually where there's going to be some sort of negotiation that goes on. So that's pretty much the process of how spot television gets placed on local broadcast stations. Now, because there's a fixed supply of desirable television station commercial inventory, the price of that inventory is going to fluctuate according to demand. And this can happen on a fairly rapid basis. Sometimes it can happen within the course of several hours, or maybe within a day or several days. There's not necessarily a set pattern per se. It kind of depends on the time of season it is, the types of programming that's happening, what the ratings are in that particular market on a particular day. There's many, many variables. Therefore, television rates are highest when demand is highest, and that's generally going to be in the fourth quarter, because many times retail and other organizations are buying advertising in order to try to boost their holiday sales. Also, second quarter is a big time because a lot of people look to spend and do a lot of leisure activity in the summer. So there's a big push to get the word out on different things in the spring months. In spot television, the buyer is not buying impression by impression. Rather, they're buying exposure opportunities to a broad demographic. Again, they're trying to get as many eyeballs as they possibly can. And they're looking for key demographics most times when they're doing that. Adults 18 to 34 is a very valuable demographic for many different types of products and services. The 25 to 44 or 25 to 54 range is also very valuable, especially with things dealing with home ownership. And then from there, there's all the other demographics and some of the things that are going to be valuable in reaching those folks. But generally in television, we're not as concerned about psychographics and trying to reach particular niche audiences. This is more about a true mass marketing approach. A rep's customers are the stations that they represent, because it's the stations that give rep companies a commission on all business that is sold. A rep's consumers are the agencies that they sell to. So the rep is really looking out for the best interest of both sides, but quite honestly, they're working for the stations. The big thing here is trust. Trust is the key to success. A station's national service manager, national sales manager, must trust the salesperson to get the best deal possible for the station. But at the same time, a buyer is also hoping that the rep is going to get the best rates possible in light of demand in the market. So the rep salesperson, or the rep programmer, as it's sometimes called, is kind of in the middle there. They're getting their bread and butter from the television stations, but they also have to keep the agencies and the media buyers happy and trust that that the rep salesperson is looking out for the best interest of these agencies as well. So a good rep salesperson is going to be communicating with both sides, letting them know what the trends are, what the flavor is, and the court of public opinion in the arena in terms of worth and value and the things that are available, and trying to do well to both sides, but still remembering that the paycheck comes from the TV stations. As far as cable goes, the process of buying cable national spot television is essentially the same as the process of buying broadcast national spot, with the exception that buying spot cable is somewhat more complicated. There's opportunities to buy more targeted ads on cable because of the addressability of cable set-top boxes, where you can get as intricate as targeting ads to certain zip codes, and depending on how elaborate the local cable operator is, sometimes even certain streets or neighborhoods within a certain zip code. So there's a lot more finessing that can happen in terms of selling on cable, and those things are sometimes very, very attractive to certain types of advertisers. Now, as far as local television advertising, local TV stations are also experiencing revenue declines because more and more local advertisers are switching their advertising budgets to online platforms. And even now, the ability to have local advertising on the various streaming platforms like Hulu, now offering budget advertising on its platform, to where it's become more and more affordable for smaller advertisers to be able to get in on the game. So there is competition out there, but it's still possible and viable for local advertisers to see effective reach using local broadcast television. Some of the advantages: from the salesperson side, if you're working sales for a local TV station, these folks tend to do very well financially. It's very possible that you're going to make six figures if you're an effective salesperson in television sales. They learn to sell digital as well as television ads. because eventually virtually all advertising is going to be digital, even if it's being delivered through the antenna with smart televisions, the advent of ATSC 3.0 or next-gen television that's going to be coming in the next 10 years or so. These salespeople are not tied to a desk all day. Yes, they have a desk, they have an office, and they make phone calls at the desk and all that sort of thing, but many times they're out and about meeting with clients. They can call on a wide variety of accounts and people, and because of that, they learn how to deal with and to empathize with a diverse range of personalities. Get to meet people from all walks of life and all various types of industries. TV salespeople can be quite creative in ways to get results for clients, and they learn about a wide variety of businesses. All of these things, for those that are curious, for those that are type of people that have that way in dealing with relationships, they tend to do well as television salespeople. The cable networks typically give local systems one break or pod per hour to sell locally. Usually that's a 2-minute break. Might be done in chunks of 2 1-minute pods, just depending on the particular cable network that we're talking about in dealing with the local cable operators. With the scarcity principle not really applicable to cable, because there's just a wide variety of channels that cable operators provide. The prices for local cable are much lower than those for local broadcast stations, not to mention the addressability factor where you can have specific content go to specific areas, even within a cable operator's reach. So low ad rates, as a result, are going to mean less revenue and lower commissions for salespeople, and that's just part of the reality of it, unless you're working in such a way that you're dealing with a regional advertiser that wants to buy all of the various service areas that a cable system services. So if you're working for Spectrum, for example, Spectrum is pretty dominant throughout North Carolina, and it's possible to be able to sell a vast majority of the state to a particular advertiser. That can be somewhat lucrative. But if you're dealing with the local business that just wants to buy a few spots to cover their particular town, there's not as much money that is realized by the salesperson in those regards. A lot more work has to be done in order to bring the money in for the company and for the salesperson. Now, the future of sales jobs in TV, there's going to be an ongoing need for salespeople who understand how to help customers navigate through the complex details of buying addressable, advanced TV inventory, which will require a knowledge of both television and programmatic. As we see television embrace more of the digital landscape, whether it's through online apps or through the upcoming ATSC 3.0 standard, there's going to be a lot of the features and benefits that we see with pure digital advertising coming to both broadcast and cable television. Selling for a small or medium-sized market TV station or local cable system is a good place to start, to learn the business, to be able to begin to build relationships with local advertisers and agencies. It still provides you that opportunity to have that personal touch in doing sales, where you do develop those relationships and you see names and faces and hear voices and all of that. A good place to start if you're going into a larger market is going to be to become an assistant buyer or a buyer at a media agency, so that you can learn about the business as a whole, learn the intricacies of buying programmatically, and then get to meet sales managers from various media companies. So 2 different kind of trains of thought here, whether you're in a larger market or a medium to small market, and it really kind of depends on where you're setting your sights and what your goals are in working in media sales. So some things to consider. That's going to do it for the chapter. We'll talk about these things when we get together in class. Bring your questions, bring your comments. We continue to ask questions like, is television still relevant in this day and age? When's television going to die? It's probably going to be with us for a while to come, assuming television is able to adapt. And we can talk about that and the impact it has on advertising and sales when we get together, as well as any other thoughts you have.